Fantastic. So, welcome along. We've got our latest We Lead for Legacy webinar. My name's Nicola. I am one of the sort of founding partners of the We Lead for Legacy program. And for those of you that have seen others, there's a whole series of these little webinars that we've created to help people learn more about public appointments and public life. And we've looked at a range of themes from becoming a counsellor. We have previously looked at becoming a magistrate, but from the point of view of people who've become magistrates, people from the community who've become magistrates. We've looked at becoming school governors, a real range. And this time we're really pleased to invite Peter Baker JP along to come and tell us more about becoming a magistrate and share some updates on changes in the system as well. So, Peter, perhaps you can tell us more. Broken away today. Perhaps you can tell us more about, I guess, what brought you into magistracy in the first place, just how you found this path, just to perhaps share that a little of that with others, and then let us know, what a magistrate is and does, and some of the pathways and opportunities coming up in the year ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nicola. It's great to see everyone again. I know I've met a number of you before when I did the event back in Altrincham. Yeah, I've been a magistrate now for 25 years, just over 25 years. I tend to sit just on adult criminal cases, and mainly in Wigan, which is my home court, and also in Bolton. But I also sit on a Crown Court panel, so I sit with Crown Court judges when we hear appeals from the Magistrates Court against sentence and conviction. I'm also the Diversity and Community Relations Magistrate for Greater Manchester, and I sit on a panel that tests Greater Manchester Police's use of out-of-court disposals when they decide to issue out-of-court resolutions or cautions. So I'm part of a panel that makes sure that the police are pitching their decision-making right. So that gives you a bit of a sense that being a magistrate isn't just about sitting in court. There's lots of other functions that magistrates do across the community, and also as part of the governance of the judiciary generally. I became a magistrate 25 years ago, really to bring the skills that I developed in my work really to the benefit of the community. I was a civil servant. I worked as a regulator in the health and safety executive. So I had sort of insights into the court procedures, bringing cases to court, rules of evidence, rule of law. And I felt that that had developed, and I've been trained in that area over a number of years, and it was a really good opportunity for me to give that back to the local community as well by being a magistrate. And there's a feedback loop as well, because employers benefit from their employees being magistrates, because you learn to balance lots of information and come to fair decisions. You have to work as part of the team to make those decisions. And develop skills of being able to assimilate and understand large amounts of information, often against very tight deadlines. And those skills you get as a magistrate are equally helpful and important, I think, in your working life, whether for a firm or as self-employed. So there's quite this sort of virtuous circle of benefit from being a magistrate. As Nicola said, I have news about recruitment into Greater Manchester, which I'll come onto in a moment, but also about, so I want to go into a little bit more detail about the selection process and what you can expect if you want to become a magistrate. But before I do that, it might be helpful just to remind everybody what a magistrate is and broadly what we do. So can you share the first slide, please, Anna? We've had a few technical problems with the slide. I couldn't share my screen for some reason, so we're having to do it in a slightly different way. And if it
sorry
doesn't
to
work,
cut you, Peter. Would we get
yeah,
the slides, Anna? Sorry.
I think yes, you will. Yeah, they'll be made available.
Okay.
The original slide deck, and of course they're on this recording as well. If it starts to get a little bit messy, I might abandon the slides in a moment. But again, just to remind you, Magistrates, or justices of the peace, as they're technically called, is an office which has been around since the 14th century. So it's a very, very old office and function. Originally, it was people really appointed by the king, as it was then, to keep the peace. But over the years, that role has developed, and it's become a very much more professionalised institution now. And magistrates are really the cornerstone of the judicial system. There's around 14,000 magistrates across England and Wales. Of course, there's a different legal system in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And we hear the majority, and nearly 90% of all criminal cases across the whole of the judicial system. And magistrates are ordinary people. You don't need to be legally qualified, or that can help, but you don't normally need to be legally qualified. And we sit on the vast majority of adult and youth criminal cases, but also we sit on family cases as well as part of the civil justice system. In the criminal courts, we deal with everything from bails to bailing defendants to breaches of bail, warrants for arrest. We'll sit on trials, determining whether someone is innocent or guilty of offences, and also go on to sentence people who are either found or plead guilty to offences. And our range of sentencing ranges from conditional discharge or absolute discharge through fine, all the way up to custodial sentences of now up to 12 months for either way offences. So we have this very broad range of activity and sanction. We don't just deal with criminal cases, we deal with a whole range of other civil matters that the local authority brings around licensing and TV licensing and so on and so forth. Magistrates normally sit as a panel of 3, with a more experienced magistrate or presiding justice who orchestrates the court proceedings themselves. More serious cases in the magistrates' courts are dealt with by district judges who are legally trained, and they sit on their own. But as I say, the vast majority of cases are dealt with by lay justices. I'll just touch on family courts. Adult criminal and youth courts are open to the public. Anybody can go into an adult criminal or youth court and listen to the proceedings, which is an important element of visibility of the judiciary. Family courts are closed to protect the identity and the confidentiality of the cases. Family courts are part of the civil jurisdiction, and it's to do with the family justice system. So they deal with, I don't sit on family, but they deal with decisions that affect vulnerable children, and such as things as parental access, rights and arrangements, enforcing child maintenance orders, and so on. We recruit into both jurisdictions now. So if you're interested in becoming a magistrate, you can apply just to do criminal, adult and youth, or just to do family, or you can apply to do both. Provisionally, preceding that, magistrates did all jurisdictions, but now the judiciary recruits specifically into criminal and family, so you don't need to do both if you don't want to. So next slide, please. Anna, thank you. One before. Thank you. No, one before. That's it. That's all. Right. I said I've got news. This webinar couldn't be more timely, actually. I think when I spoke to you in Altrincham, that I'd sort of got sense that there was some recruitment coming, but I didn't have the details at that stage. It's just been announced by the advisory committee that there's going to be significant recruitment in 2006 into the magistracy. This is across the country in England and Wales. So it's going to be happening in a number of regions. This is in response mainly to the government's reforms of the judiciary system. You've probably seen some news in the media yesterday about changes to the system. These are all reforms principally to increase or decrease the delays in particular criminal cases, and also to reduce the burden on the Crown Court system who have got significant backlogs of the more serious cases. There's a number of proposals going through the government process at the moment, looking at moving more cases from the Crown Court into the Magistrates Court. One proposal from the Leveson Review was also to introduce an intermediate tier of magistrates and judges sitting together to listen to the middle order serious cases. Those proposals have not yet landed fully. They're going through the government process and the parliamentary process, but there is no doubt that more magistrates are going to be needed in the next number of years to be able to help with the significant backlog and delays in the judicial system. In Greater Manchester in particular, at the moment, Greater Manchester has around about 800 magistrates in both criminal and family jurisdictions. We are the second biggest bench outside of London. The recruitment ambition into Greater Manchester for next year is that we're going to be recruiting up to 120 adult and youth criminal magistrates and up to 20 family magistrates, which is quite a significant increase. This is the biggest recruitment campaign that I can remember in 25 years into the magistracy. So now is the time, if you are really seriously interested in becoming a magistrate, now is a peak opportunity to really get involved in the process. It will be done over four batches. So the first tranche recruitment will start on the 2nd of January, and the recruitment will be open for 2 weeks. So you'll be able to apply during a 2-week period. Then it will be done quarterly after that. So it'll be repeated again in the first 2 weeks of April, and the dates are up there. It'll be repeated again in the first 2 weeks in July, and it'll be repeated again in the first 2 weeks in October. That's really just to spread the load of the recruitment process across the whole of the year. As I say, we're looking to recruit up to 120 adult criminal and 20 family. That's a minimum requirement. If we feel there are more suitable candidates, then we will put a case to the judicial office to recruit more. But that's the sort of minimum number we are aiming for over that year. So now's the time to seriously start thinking about this. I'll go into a little bit more detail afterwards about what the process will looks like, and also what you need to do to prepare for applying, because there's quite a lot you have to do before you even apply to become a magistrate. Can I have the next slide, please, Anna? Thank you. So who can be a magistrate? It's all about personal qualities. As I say, you don't need to be legally qualified, although that can help. And there are magistrates in Greater Manchester who are solicitors and barristers, but the vast majority aren't legally qualified. And it's about demonstrating those personal qualities, being awareness of social issues, what's affecting your communities, what's going on in your communities, being mature and understanding people, and have that real sense of fairness, because as a magistrate, you're there as an independent member of the judiciary, and dealing with cases without fear or favour, and making decisions about whether you prefer the prosecution case or whether you prefer the defendant's case. So having that level of impartiality and sense of fairness is really key to this. You've got to be reliable and committed to serve the community. Being a magistrate, you need to sit a minimum of 13 days a year as a magistrate. That's the minimum requirement, or 26 half days. If you sit in both criminal and family, you need to sit at least 15 days in both across the jurisdiction. So it's quite a significant time commitment. You also, if you're a sitting magistrate, need to put aside 2 days for training. And when you're a new magistrate, in your first 2 years, you will be doing at least 10 days induction training as well. So it's quite a significant time commitment. So it's important you're able to commit yourselves to what's required of the judiciary. I've already touched on this. You can get literally a folder of documents, but it tends to be more electronically now. But nevertheless, there will be a lot of documentation and information particularly in trials, that you need to be able to understand quickly, follow evidence as it's being presented to you, and also to be able to communicate effectively, both within your bench of 3 people, because you'll retire and deliberate about what you're going to do about a particular case. So being able to work and communicate as part of a team is quite important. But also, if you become a presiding justice, you're delivering pronouncements in open court as well. So communication is quite key there. And then there's the decision-making thing. You need to be able to think logically. You are supported by criteria and guidance from the Judicial Office and the Sentencing Council to help you make decisions, but they're not tram lines. They're not dictated. What you do isn't dictated to you. You have a legal framework within which you operate. You have sentencing guidelines, but you have a lot of discretion within those guidelines as to what you do. So you've got to be able to weigh up people's arguments, give weight to pros and cons of people's arguments, and then reach a fair decision which anybody looking at would look on as fair and impartial. I'll come on to this in a little bit more detail, but you need to be of good character, of course. You need to make sure that the public have confidence in the impartiality and the judiciary, and have trust in the judiciary as well. So there are certain things which will bar you from becoming a magistrate. So, for example, if you committed serious offence in the past, then it's unlikely you are going to become a magistrate. And there are other criteria which may bar you from that. So if you've got a record of a number of minor but nevertheless serious offences, that may bar you. If you've been declared a bankrupt, you won't be able to be a magistrate. You won't be appointed. But you will be asked as part of the selection process to disclose any previous convictions going back to when you started convicted. The Rehabilitation of Offences Act doesn't apply to magistrates, so you'll be asked to disclose any conviction that you've had. You'll be asked to disclose whether you've got civil proceedings against you in a county court, whether you've been declared a bankrupt. As I say, some of these may bar you completely outright from being a magistrate, and I'll explain how that works in a moment. But, for example, if you've got a speeding offence from 5 years ago, that's unlikely to be a problem, but you must disclose it. And then it's for the advisory committee that deal with the appointments to decide whether or not you are of good character and can be appointed. So there's a lot of discretion around that. Also, you mustn't have any conflicts of interest which conflict with your role as a magistrate. So, for example, if you work for the Crown Prosecution Service, you can't be a magistrate, obviously, because the CPS tend to bring the majority of cases to the magistrates' court. If you're a serving police officer, if you're a serving prison officer, you can't be a magistrate. Other judicial roles, for example, if you work for an organisation, as I did, a health and safety executive that brings cases to court, it doesn't necessarily bar you from being a magistrate, because there are ways in which you can be excluded from certain cases, so that there's no prejudice and there's no criticism about unfairness. And it's the same for some of the family courts. If you work in the family system, it doesn't necessarily bar you from being a family magistrate, other than in some circumstances. But nevertheless, these are the sorts of things you need to disclose when you apply to be a magistrate. And there's a whole heap of guidance available to you as you go through the application process, which helps you decide, whether or not you've got conflicts of interest and how to tackle it as part of the judicial application process. You can be of any age between 18 and 74, albeit you probably won't get appointed if you're over 70, because there's an expectation that you sit for at least 5 years. So obviously, if you're 74, then you're not going to be able to meet that level of commitment. But once you reach the age of 75, as a magistrate, you have to leave the magistracy. It's the same with judges as well. That we are particularly keen to recruit people below the age of 40 because of the sort of demographics in Greater Manchester, and also from underrepresented groups as well. And I spend a lot of my time talking to university students and college students to encourage people who are 18 and in their 20s to apply to become magistrates. So I was really pleased to hear that there's some family interest in becoming a magistrate as well, because younger people are really quite key to helping us make decisions, because a lot of defendants are within that sort of age group. So it's important to understand what motivates them. And then finally, as I say, I've already mentioned this, that there's a real commitment of sitting as a magistrate for at least 13 full days. And as I say, in your first couple of years, there's quite a high training load as well for you. So I'll talk through the application process now, and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end of this, but I just want to make sure that we go through the process. So there's things you need to do before you apply. So if you're thinking of applying in January, just after Christmas, then there's things you need to be getting on with really now. If you haven't done so already, I encourage anybody interested in becoming a magistrate to register their interest through the Magistrates website. This means you get email alerts for when the recruitments are actually launched. I noticed this morning that the recruitment into Greater Manchester is now on the website with the details of the recruitment alongside all the other regions. And the Northwest generally are recruiting as well. So whilst Greater Manchester will start in January, Lancashire and Cumbria will have its recruitment in February, and Merseyside will be recruiting in March. So if you live in parts of Greater Manchester, sort of out on the edge, and it might be easier for you to sit in Lancashire or Merseyside, for example, then they're now having a similar scale of recruitment next year, which is phased with Greater Manchester. But you can see the dates on the advisory committee websites now. Before you apply, you must observe court sittings if you're applying for criminal cases. So, and the guidance suggests you must see at least 2 court sittings. So it might be a bit tight if you haven't done this already before January. This is important because, one, it gives you a real feel for the magistracy and helps you decide whether you want to do it or not. But also, when you apply, you will be asked to give your reflections on what you felt about your observed sittings. This only applies to if you're applying for criminal. If you're applying to the family jurisdiction, because family courts are closed, obviously you can't go and sit in a family court, but you are still expected to research the family system and the family judicial process, because again, you'll be asked to give some reflections on what you think about the family process as part of your application. You also, if you're employed, you also need to talk to your employer about becoming a magistrate, because they will have to release you for at least 13 days a year to sit as a magistrate. Hopefully your employer will be very supportive and see the benefits of all of this. They have to, by law, if you're appointed as a magistrate, give you the time off, but they don't have to pay you. So it's up to you and them to decide whether or not you're going to take paid leave or whether you'll take unpaid leave. I know that's very difficult for some people. If you're a civil servant, often you're given paid leave to be a magistrate. But in the private sector, it may not be possible for them to pay you for the time off. There is a mechanism for you to claim an allowance from the court service, and I'll come on to that in a moment, for wages that you miss from becoming a magistrate. And as I say, check that you're eligible. You need to check that your background won't bar you from becoming a magistrate, because there's little point in applying if you're not going to get through that step. And also your eligibility from the point of view of what you do and what your interests are. As I say, if you work for the CPS, you can't apply anyway. But there are other professions which you just need to be aware of may have restrictions on your ability to be a magistrate. And again, there's lots of guidance on the website that will help you check your eligibility. So the application process, it's all online now, and nearly everything is done remotely, including the interview process. That came out of COVID, obviously, but it's continued in a similar sort of vein because it's really quite efficient. The process can take up to 12 months from start to finish. So from you applying and from when you're appointed, or when you're told that you've been successful, it'll take 12 months. Now, there's a reason for that. There's a number of stages, and there's lots of checks and balances that have to happen, and the court system are working very hard at the moment to make all of that as efficient as possible, particularly given the scale of the recruitment next year in 2026. But you need to go into this knowing that this can take a while from start to finish. It's not a very quick process, and there are reasons for that. So your first step is the online application. As I say, there'll be these 2-week windows quarterly over next year when you can go onto the website and you can formally apply to be a magistrate. And there'll be everything from the basic questions about your name, your address, your personal details, your contact details, and so on. There'll also be questions on there about your character and your eligibility. So there'll be boxes on there that say, who do you work for? Are you any of these categories of people? Also, they'll ask you details of your previous convictions. And as I say, there's no time limits to that. You have to disclose all of your previous criminal convictions. And as I mentioned, any issues around bankruptcy and so on. You need to disclose that up front as part of the application process. You'll also be asked to provide a reflection about your court observations or your family research, and you'll also be required to give 2 referees. If you're employed, one of your referees must be your employer as well. So that's your application stage. That's the sift in effect. And if you've got previous convictions or eligibility criteria that mean you can't be a magistrate, then you may not get through that process. Hopefully you will. And if you get through that application process, then you have the next phase, which is a qualifying assessment. And this is before an interview. So the second stage is a qualifying assessment. What that is that it's all done online again. You'll be given a number of typical scenarios that a magistrate typically will come across in their role. And you'll be asked to provide a view as to what you would do in those circumstances. There's some guidance on the website again, which gives you a couple of examples of what these are like. They're not sentencing exercises, so you won't get, this is the circumstances of the case. What would you do? What would your sentence be? They're more to do with those attributes that I referred to before. So they're trying to test out your ability to work with others. They're trying to test your ability to make decisions and your communication skills. So one of the examples on the website is you hear a case, you're working with 2 other magistrates, you retire, and 2 of your magistrates haven't picked up on a particular critical piece of the evidence in a trial. How do you have the conversation with them about the innocence or guilt of an individual when you feel that they haven't identified all of the factors? So it's actually testing how you deal with an absence of information and how you tackle the understanding of others, work together as a team, fill the gaps in the information, and then come to a decision that you all agree on. So that's what that qualifying assessment test. It sounds a bit complicated. Actually, it's quite straightforward. In fact, you're given options and you choose an option and so on. But it's really trying to have an initial test of your ability to make decisions, handle information, work part of a team, and so on. So that's the qualifying assessment process. If you're successful at that stage, you'll then be invited to an interview. And the interview process will be normally around about 3 months after you do the qualifying assessment. And you'll be invited to it. It's held virtually, but you can ask for it to be done face-to-face if if you want, but the majority of these are done virtually. And the interview lasts around about 75 minutes. And this is where they really test those attributes of social awareness, understanding people, fairness, your commitment to magistracy, your ability to handle information and communicate, and the way in which you think logically in balancing factors and reaching decisions. They'll also test your motivation to apply as a magistrate. Why do you want to be a magistrate? What are you going to bring to the magistracy? What's your commitment? Can you actually deliver the time commitment and training commitment in the long term as a magistrate? And also they'll explore the reasons you've given around eligibility and the reasons why your appointment may affect the public's trust in the magistracy. So that's the point at which if you haven't been barred completely because you've met one of the barring criteria, that's where they will test out whether an old previous conviction or an association or a family member issue might be an issue, and test that out and see what mitigation can be put in place. Again, there's guidance on the website about the interview process. There's a lot of guidance that will be sent to you as well if you're successful and are interviewed for an interview. As I say, the process can take several months. If you're successful at interview, you'll get an offer of an appointment, and you're then going to be subject to external checks, mainly DBS checks, just to make sure that you don't have criminal convictions that may affect your ability to be a magistrate. If you're unsuccessful at interview, you can ask for feedback. You don't get it automatically, but you can ask for it. But if you're unsuccessful at interview, you can't then apply to be a magistrate for 2 years. You have to wait for 2 years before you can apply. That's only if you're unsuccessful at interview. If you're unsuccessful at some of the early administrative stages, that doesn't stop you applying again at the next recruitment. If you're successful, as I say, that you'll be subject to DBS checks, which inevitably can take a while, and they can take months before the DBS come back with the information. And then finally, if you're approved as a magistrate, you're approved by a senior presiding judge on behalf of the Lady Chief Justice. The aim for the recruitment next year is to get people sitting from March in 2027. So you can see that there will be a lot of pressure on getting the process working as efficiently, as effectively as possible. So the court's in with a fighting chance of getting people sitting as soon as possible, or at least starting their training in the March, April of the following year. So hopefully that gives you a real sense of the process. Be prepared for the time it takes. That's the only thing I will tell you about, because there's so many stages. And of course, there are a lot of people who apply to be a magistrate, and it's really important that all the candidates at every stage are properly considered, because it is a really important role of being a magistrate, and it's an important part of the judicial system and society as a whole. Two things again I'd repeat: if you are really interested in becoming a magistrate, applying either in January or the later April recruitment, get your court sittings. Visit your local courts, either one near where you live, or for me, for example, although I'd applied to Wigan, I worked in Liverpool, so I went to sit and observe a magistrate's court in Sefton. That's perfectly all right, as long as you go and see a court. Best thing to do is contact the court, tell them that that's what you want to do. The court staff are often incredibly helpful, but what you need to do is make sure that there's a number of court sittings that day. Some courts don't operate on certain days, so it's important that you don't just turn up because you might be disappointed. Clearly, if you go to Manchester City to observe, there's more chance of seeing something because that's the busiest court. But other courts are relatively busy as well. But contact the court first before you do your observe sitting. And also register your expression of interest, because you'll get sent the application information directly rather than you having to go and look at it. If you don't think you're ready to be a magistrate but still want to be involved, The advisory committee in Greater Manchester are at the moment looking for lay people to sit on the application and interview panels. The link I had, unfortunately, has now disappeared. I'll try and find it again and make sure that you're sent it. But you can get onto some of the advisory committee panels and get involved in the recruitment process next year, which gives you a very good insight, one, of the recruitment process, but also the role of a magistrate as well, and may put you in quite a good position if you want to apply at a later stage. As I say, the link I had for applying to be a member of the recruitment committee doesn't work at the moment for some reason. So I'm going to go and find out where that's got to, and I'll send it to Nicola and Anna, and they can forward it to you once I have it. Next slide, please. I think that's it. That's it. Yes, that QR code will send you to the Magistrates application website. As I say, there's loads of information about how to be a magistrate, what the process looks like, FAQs, eligibility criteria, and so on, are all available on that website. So please apply. We need you to be a magistrate. As I say, we've got a big recruitment coming up, so this is a really good time to think about and applying to be a magistrate. Okay, Nicola, that's me finished. Happy to take questions, and thank you, Anna, for driving these slides.
Thank you. No, there's a lot of information to take in there, but people will get the slides, or they can contact us afterwards for slides. And yeah, just digesting all that myself, exciting stuff. So there's clearly a lot of scope and a lot of need given the significant numbers of magistrates you're looking for across those different categories mentioned: adult, youth, family. And I guess this is just Greater Manchester that you've been talking about, but there's a wider national picture that people might have questions around other areas. I know I might if it doesn't come up, but yeah, I think let's kick off with some questions and see if anybody's got anything burning that they'd like to either know more about, look at in a particular instance.
Joanna put something in there.
Brilliant. So I haven't seen that. What'd she say?
So if someone's worked as an interpreter in criminal and family court proceedings, would this be considered as having had a court seat for the purposes of the application, Peter? Additionally, is this type of experience relevant and permissible in an application form?
Right. Yes. I mean, clearly, if you've worked in the judicial system, it's a really helpful thing to do, because both on the application, but particularly at the interview stage, and as you can probably expect, they are competency-based interviews. So they're looking for you to demonstrate that you've got the experience against the attributes, but also can describe them in a way which explains why you're suitable to be a magistrate. So it's a very sort of public civil servancy type of process. So if you've got experience of the judicial process, that's a really good, that should, in theory, give you some really good examples of how you can demonstrate those attributes which are recognizable. To say whether or not in a particular case you are eligible or otherwise, I'll just sort of hold this thing up. These are the eligibility criteria. Oh, you can't see it. These are the eligibility criteria. It goes on to pages and pages and pages. So I don't want to go through this all through everything. But as a general principle, clearly, if you work for the CPS, you're a police officer or a current prison officer, absolutely, that bars you completely, and you can sort of understand that. But if you've been an interpreter in the court system, I can't see any reason why that would be a problem at all. That's certainly not one of the ones that comes out as a barring criteria. In fact, it's quite a positive thing, I think, to be able to show that you've had an interest. There are, on the family side, education welfare officers. I think this is right. Education welfare officers are a bit like police officers. If you're an education welfare officer, I don't think you can apply. Or there are certain criteria which means you can't apply. But there's a document on the website, and if I can find it, I'll send it to Anna and Nicola, because it's a standalone PDF. It's a table with activities and occupations down the left-hand side, and then it tells you the things that you can and can't can't apply for. So I'm just looking at this, like education welfare officer, for example. You're not ineligible, but your eligibility depends on your circumstances, or it may have conditions attached. So it depends what you do as an education welfare officer. If you're a member of the Community Safety Partnership, for example, you're ineligible. As I say, police officer, Crown Prosecution Service, you're ineligible. Interpreter, no, you're not ineligible, but your eligibility depends on your circumstances. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a big issue really as being an interpreter. In fact, I think it's a quite positive thing.
Great. So somebody's
I've seen civil servants. Yes, civil servants.
Who was that question from? Out of interest.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
Joanna.
Joanna, yeah, she'd alluded to that earlier and obviously got that legal interest. So I don't know if you got any further questions or response from that, Joanna, whether that helps just to clarify things. Is she still there? Yeah, she's there.
Yes. Well, actually, it's been a few years that I'm not doing an interpreter. I used to be a legal interpreter from 2019 until 2023. So there were a number of cases, criminal and family court, that I've attended, and I've also been the purpose of interpreting, because my language, my first language is Kurdish. So at the moment, I'm not doing it, so I don't know how did that go. But it was very important that you just kind of explain. Yes, it would be counted as because recently, and also I've done some volunteering at the Bolton Magistrate Court. It was part of the CVS. I was volunteering for CVS, and it was something they were doing like in Magistrate. I was in the court for a long time. So yes, but another that drive me to another question actually. So the course seat must be very current time, or if it's in the past, it still counts.
12 months. So your court's observations must be within the 12 months before your application.
So observation has to be for the criminal court and family, or the observation for immigration, because I've had observation, a lot of observation for immigration. I don't know if it counts or not.
No, sadly, it needs, if you're applying to the criminal court, it has to be the criminal court. You need to go to a magistrate's criminal court to observe. As I said before, you can't observe a family court because they're closed. So you don't need to see a family. If you're applying just for family, you can't see a family court, but you do need to do research about the family court, because on your application process, on your application, you need to give some observations or some feedback about what you've learnt about the family system, just to demonstrate that you've actually done it. And it's the same for the criminal court as well.
Okay, perfect. So this observation needs to be done before the application submission.
Yeah.
And just
so as I say, if you're applying in January, you've got to have done at least 2 before then.
Okay.
It may have been said explicitly, but just to sort of recap, if somebody wants to get into a local court to observe, how do they go about that? Do they just drop in? Do they call them up? How do you get a I
wouldn't drop in because there's a chance that there are no cases to see, for example, because some courts don't sit on certain days. But the best thing to do is to contact the court. Numbers available on the court website. Explain that you're interested in becoming a magistrate. Everyone in the court system has been primed for this, so that they'll expect it. Explain that you want to sit. They'll give you an idea of when the best days to sit are, when there's a good sort of collection of cases, remand. Manchester City Court's the better court to go and sit, because there's 7 courts, so there's always something happening in Manchester City. Wigan's okay. Mondays are better because they tend to have a lot of remand cases on Monday. But contact the court, find out what's the best day, make arrangements to visit. You don't have to visit the whole day. You can just sit in court for a couple of hours in the morning or the afternoon. you go to court to the main reception, and they'll put you in touch with one of the ushers who'll be able to tell you and give you a court list as to what's the best sort of selection of cases to go and sit on. You know,
Am I
there will
right in
be
thinking that these are publicly open anyway, and so
criminal courts are open. So in theory, you can just turn up and go and
yeah.
sit at the back of court.
But
There's
it's just if people are thinking, oh, can I do that? Is this for me? You know, technically they're open access anyway.
They're open access. Criminal adult and criminal adult and youth are open courts. Anybody can go into a court and sit at the back for any reason whatsoever. It's important that they're open. Family courts aren't; they're closed. You can't sit in a family court.
Great. Hopefully that's helpful. I wonder if anybody else got any other
Yeah,
questions?
there's a question from Rayhan. Do the same restrictions that apply to civil servants for political neutrality apply to magistrates? For example, if you do parliamentary advocacy for charities, different causes, etc., will this be potentially perceived as a conflict of interest?
Civil servants first. Unless you work for the Crown Prosecution Service, which is part of the civil service, generally speaking, being a civil servant doesn't bar you. What you can't do is sit on cases that are brought by your government department. So, for example, when I was in HSE, I couldn't sit on HSE cases. I couldn't sit on child benefit cases because they were brought by the Department for Work and Pensions, which was my government department. So I couldn't sit on those. And it's up to you to say I can't sit on them, and there are rules around that. Most cases now tend to be brought by the CPS anyway, but you know there are RSPCA cases. There are cases brought by the local authority. So again, if you work for the RSPCA or you work for the council, you won't be able to sit on council led or RSPCA cases. Working for charities doesn't bar you at all. Again, in fact, you know, it may well give you a better sense of social community and put you in a position to give some pretty good examples. The important thing about political affiliation is the judiciary is apolitical. It's an independent arm of the state. You are expected to state two things when you become a magistrate. One is an oath of allegiance to the judiciary, that you'll deal with everything fairly, without fear or favour. So your own political views must not at any stage impact on your decision making as a magistrate. That has to be left at the door. Second one is an oath of allegiance to the Crown. So if you've got a problem with the King, the Crown process, then you need to disclose that as well, and that probably means you won't be able to be a magistrate. So be aware of that. You have to swear an oath of allegiance to the judiciary and an oath of allegiance to the Crown, because you're a Crown appointment, and the judicial system operates on behalf of the Crown particularly. So bear those two things in mind. But you know, everybody's got views. We're all people. We've got political views, personal views, all of that. Those biases or views, and this is something that will very clearly be pushed home as part of the application process, and also the training when you become a magistrate, is that those things have to be left at the door as you come into the magistrate, because you're there to deliver justice impartially.
Right. Lots of detail there. Taking it all in. I'm sure people are almost ready to grab some lunch before long, but we've got time for a few more questions. So any more on the questions front? Feel free to come off mute. Irfan, looks like you've got a question.
Yes, Nicola. Hi, Peter.
Might have been follow up from your original one, but fire away.
Right. Okay. You know, the process of becoming a magistrate, you got a application to then there's a qualifying assessment, and there is an interview for 75 minutes. And
Yep.
if you fail the interview, then you have to wait for 2 years. How long it takes to get the outcome of the interview outcome, Peter, from the day we interview to that outcome?
Yes, I mean you don't get it automatically, but if you ask for feedback from the interview, it's not quick, because as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of information and once the interviews have been had, there's a moderation process that goes on behind the scenes, because they'll be interviewing more people than we need, and the interviews are scored against the criteria. So that process can take about a month before the final shortlist is decided, and it's decided who gets it, the role and otherwise. But the scoring process, I'm not absolutely sure, because I don't sit on the interview panels. If you ask for feedback, I think what you get are the scores and a very brief narrative. You know, the applicant could have stressed this more, or you know, why the score was as it was. You won't get reams of interview feedback. It'll be very, very brief. I can't see why that can't be delivered within weeks, if not a month at most, because most of the information should be available, because they have to generate it as part of the deliberation process anyway. But I can't say for certain how long it would take, particularly given that we've got the recruitment exercise of the scale that we've got next year. That's likely to be something which might take a bit of time for it to come out. But as I say, you know, you've got 2 years anyway before you can apply again to be a magistrate.
Right, okay. I mean, the same question like Joanna was asking, if you worked as a like interpreter in the court. I had an opportunity to sit as a jury in Manchester court a couple of years ago. So can I add that one as well in the application form? Or
yeah. Well, I'm not sure whether it'll ask you whether you've been a juror. Being a juror, I mean, it's part of your civic duty. That doesn't bar you from being a magistrate at all. Again, you know, it gives you some insight, doesn't it, into the judicial process, and how, as part of a group of people, you came to a decision. So it's the sort of thing I would be looking at using as examples as well of experience you've got. But being a juror doesn't bar you at all.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Nicola. Thank you, Peter.
Perfect. More questions there. Anything else? I know I've got a quick question, but it's relates to something else. So I'm just checking whether there's any more. Oh, something gone in the chat there. Just having a look. Oh, Jamoke. Do you want to come and ask the question, Jamoke? Oh, we've got Rayhan there's got a question as well. So perhaps Rayhan, if we come to you first.
We've done Rayhan's. It was
we've done fine. Apologies. So sorry, I thought Irfan had asked that. And then so Jamoke, you're talking about professions that are ineligible. Do you want to just obviously it's an obvious question, but you might want to add to it. It's a question around, if you're working with young people, will it be a conflict to apply as a magistrate in a youth courts?
Is there anything you want to add, Jamoke, to that?
Hello, was a question, just to clarify.
Okay. Again, with all these things, it depends. If you're on a youth offender panel, a member of a youth offender panel, you can't, or on the Youth Justice Board. So if you've got a formal role, you won't be able to apply, because you are part of the judicial system, if you see what I mean. Similar, if you're a probation officer, you can't apply to be a magistrate. But if you're working with youth groups, volunteering youth groups and so on, again, there's no reason why you can't apply at all. There may be occasions where you have to sit out a case, for example. So a typical example, you're on a youth bench and a youth comes in who you know or you've worked with as part of your outreach work, then clearly you have to say you've got a conflict of interest and stand down from the bench. But in terms of your application process, unless you work in the either as a social worker, and even social workers to some extent can be magistrates. But if you work in the youth justice system, you can't. But again, it depends on what your role is, how often you do it. If you've worked in the system and you don't do it anymore, that's not a bar, but you'll have to disclose it. So I think the key thing is when you come to the application process, where you get to the bit about, is there any reason why you don't, if there may be a conflict of interest, you just disclose it. and then it's up to the advisory committee to decide whether it's a bar. But again, there's a very long, detailed list of roles and functions that are available. And again, I'll see if I can dig it out and send it to you to save you hunting for it, which gives a lot more detail as to whether you're eligible, and if you are, what sort of conditions or circumstances can be applied to you sitting as a magistrate.
That makes sense, Jamoke? Any? Hopefully.
It does.
Great, perfect. So, unless anybody's got anything else,
I
Diane's
have
come
a
off. Go for it,
question.
Diane. Yeah, go for it, Diane.
Yeah, the question I have, Peter mentioned about the selection process, and then one of the elements he mentioned was about to be aware of social issues. Are we talking about social issues generally, or we have to be particular or about it, or just generally?
No, I think it's generally. You're trying to put across, I think, as part of the application process, that you understand social issues. Clearly, as a magistrate, you've got to have an understanding of, the causes of crime. You've got to have an understanding of what are the issues in your community that crime impacts on. What are the possible solutions to crime? So it's that sort of generic understanding of the impact of crime, particularly crime, on your community, and how the judicial system is part of the solution. So it's sort of that sort of level. Yeah, you don't need to be able to demonstrate that you're au fait with any one particular aspect of social justice or so on. So, for example, if you're working in a community group, you'll be able to talk about what your community group does, why it's there, what it does, and so on.
Right. Good. Just a quick one from me, but I think it's obvious. If you're not from Greater Manchester, let's say you're in Cheshire, Lancashire, around the edges, I take it you could go for a role in Greater Manchester, or you could go for a role in your home borough, from what I've heard you say previously.
Yeah.
And I guess the recruitment call-outs there for other parts of the UK, and it's a case of just looking at when the dates are.
Yep.
And then similarly, there might be 4 call-outs in some of these other areas. Is it sort of a pattern that's come up and down the land?
Yes, it is. I don't know about elsewhere, but outside the northwest. But two things I'll just mention. If you apply to Greater Manchester, you're applying to the whole of Greater Manchester. So I said at the start that I sit in Wigan and Bolton. Well, that's sort of historical, because back in the old days, you were appointed to your local bench. And now it doesn't work like that, because the benches are effectively the county. So Greater Manchester Met is the bench. You're appointed to Greater Manchester, and you are expected to sit anywhere in Greater Manchester. So if you live in Bolton, for example, it doesn't follow that you'll end up in Bolton. You're more likely to sit in Manchester City, because certainly in your early years, because that's where the majority of cases are of particular types. You can ask to be rotated to be more local if you can, but that's driven by the demand in the court system. You don't have a right to ask for that. So the expectation is you should be able to sit in any court. So that Wigan, Bolton, Rochdale, Tameside, Stockport, and Manchester City. That's where the courts are. You don't have to live in Greater Manchester to be in Greater Manchester. You don't have to live. You can live anywhere and work in Greater Manchester. And likewise, if you live in Greater Manchester, you can apply to courts outside of Greater Manchester. So if you live on the border, for example, I live in Wigan. I could get to Lancashire courts reasonably easily, and it may be that you work in somewhere else, and it's easier for you to get to court from work than it is from home, perhaps. As I said, I worked in Sefton, and Sefton Magistrates Court was opposite my office. I still apply for Greater Manchester Mind, but I could have gone for Sefton if I wanted. And you're right, Michaela. January is the Greater Manchester recruitment window. February is Lancashire and Cumbria. March is Merseyside. Don't know about Cheshire. Don't know about other counties or Yorkshire. Those are available, and then it starts again. April's Greater Manchester. May is Lancashire, Cumbria, and so on. You need to live relatively close to the bench though, because you'll have to travel. You've got to be there at least by 9:30 in the morning. So that may well affect where you want to apply for as well. So hopefully that's helpful.
Definitely. And I guess I know the answer to this, but I'm asking it just in case. So clearly the magistracy roles, it's a voluntary role.
Yep.
But I'm right in thinking that there may be out-of-pocket expenses or travel
Yep.
costs potentially to attend training or certain things.
Yep.
Is there a I'm just thinking if people are hearing, oh, they might have to travel to Stockport,
Sure.
they live in Rochdale. I don't know,
Sure.
it'd be interesting to just understand expenses a little more.
Absolutely. Yeah, you do get expenses to sit as a magistrate. So you get mileage, for example, if you drive from home to court and back again. You get your public transport paid for by the judiciary for doing your court service, wherever that may well be in Greater Manchester. You also get a subsistence allowance, depending on how long you're away from home. It's sort of about £7, I think, for the day, and £10 if you're there for longer than 8 hours, I think is how it works. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's broadly how it says, or it's actuals, depending on the circumstances. If your employer says you can sit, but we're not going to pay you, you can claim a loss of earnings allowance. And similarly, if you're self-employed, you can claim, because of course you can't earn while you're sitting as a magistrate. You can claim, and I think the rate at the moment is up to £134.96, very precise, a day for loss of earnings. Okay, and there's a procedure you go through to be able to do that. So yeah, the aim is for magistrates not to be out of pocket if they possibly can, with both allowances and loss of earnings.
Brilliant. No, that's just all helpful context for people, hopefully. I'm just wondering whether there's any final questions before we thank Peter for his time and let everybody get on their way. Sure, there's busy afternoons afoot. So we'll thank you ever so much, Peter. We do appreciate you coming back. Hopefully this is a useful conduit for you. We've had numerous chats, and then you've come on a programme day, and now we're doing what we said we'd do, which was have that follow-up webinar, and we hope that we can cascade this learning far and wide. So certainly, yes, anybody following up on this on our Listen Again link, do follow the links that will be in the YouTube page that will take you straight to some of this information. Wonderful. Well, I'll just say thank you very much for everybody giving up an hour or so of the time. I hope you've been enthused and inspired to look into it. I'm certainly interested to go and sit in a court and just see how does it feel. Is it something, we can encourage more people into? And we look forward to seeing what transpires. Yeah, great, Michaela, thank you. And yes, please do seriously consider this as a role. And as I think it was you, Jamoka. I mean, if you've got family, friends, work colleagues who have said, "Oh, I wouldn't mind being a magistrate," please refer them to the website. Clearly, the more people we have apply for these roles, the better it will be in terms of the selection process. And I'll make sure that I'll send through the details of the criteria when I can find them. Okay. Well, I've already shared it on Facebook and in our Facebook group, so we'll be getting getting the word out. I think it's really important, as you say, to diversify and get some fresh perspectives in the judiciary. So fantastic.